My partner in crime. How you doing, Danny?
We're still here.
Attaboy. Looks like your venue has changed a little bit from the last time I saw you. Whereabouts are you now?
Little difference. I'm just down the road. I'm actually in Sudbury. Got some work training I have to do today and tomorrow. So figured to take a nice quiet night out here and
Nice.
get better cell service.
Nice. Well, I want to wish you on behalf of all of CFN and all those who are watching tonight, happy Walleye Wednesday. And I do appreciate this episode. I did get to meet an icon in my world anyway, Harold Gravatt, who we'll be speaking with shortly. Needless to say, that event that happened out in the Sioux, just some really, really good people participated in that event, Harold being one of them. But there was a few sticks that came up from the Michigan area. And Danny, speak to that, because are there any other tournaments that you're aware of on the NOWT circuit that has a lot of U.S. content?
No, we've had the odd group or person team come out of Michigan or something that come up to like Duberville or something like that. So this was the highest content we've seen, and we know most of them. John Goebel, who's a charterer of Drummond Island, who was actually my tournament partner when we fished the Master Walleyes down in Monroe last year. Really good guy. Love fishing with John. He was fishing with Eric Carlson, who's been on numerous times. He's been on the Next Bite with all of those guys as well. So then you had the Atkinsons there. They fished the NWTs and stuff like that. So we had a lot of people that were, especially on the American side, they're well known on that side, and our side as well. Like they're top anglers.
Right on. Well, let's take a moment to say hello to those who are watching with us. Richard, how you doing, my friend? Nice walleye indeed. Mitch is in the house all the way up from Timmins. Good to see you. And, of course, Lloyd, my fishing buddy from this past weekend, all the way from Saskatchewan. Enjoyed a great weekend up at Camp Mac. Really enjoyed having you up there, Lloyd. You were a solid guy. A lot of fun to be around. And, of course, Tony was always with us, and the one and only female angler of the year for the NOWT, Marlisa Female Bacon. Yeah, baby.
She's telling me about my light situation here.
What's the deal with the light? Can you explain that?
You know, the YouTube ring lights there. She keeps thinking I need to get one. Like she's convinced me that because I'm usually in our screen porch at home right now, so it's usually pretty dark in here. So right now, I'm dealing with these lights, and she bugged me about not bringing it with me, and I was like, no, I'm not bringing it with me. So.
No, I will say this: if anybody needs a light, it's better you than me, because this is as lit as I need it right now.
Yeah.
I've got a face for radio, but nonetheless, speaking of which, we are going to continue on with the Power Hour. Of course, our special sponsor, Powell Castings, who is a big supporter of CFN and a lot of things in the fishing industry, has jumped behind this. And the whole idea is basically to reach out, talk to tournament organizers, tournament participants, tournament directors, tournament sponsors, basically just to give them, a platform through which they can promote their event, talk about their event, and perhaps give us a little bit of 411 on how they got associated, caught up, and participating in the event that they're speaking of. But I will say this, Dan, I haven't spoke to you since Camp Mac.
How was that?
Dude, phenomenal.
Yeah,
absolutely. Anybody that fishes Georgian Bay and the French River, at least where it flows into Georgian Bay.
You've seen a few pictures there. I know that Sean Leonard, a friend of mine, apparently he was there with I think his mom had went as well. So
yeah.
Sean was nice enough to put a new motor on my boat before he left, so that was helpful. Thanks to him and Legend Boats for that. I'm glad to be back on the water.
Well, what a small world! What an absolute small world! Because his mom, Fran, who was there as part of the staff and helped out in a big way, she was a delight to be around. All of a sudden came over to me on the last night and said, "Scotty, I got to take a picture. My son wants a picture of you," and I'm like, your son wants a picture of me? I want a picture of him. He's caught way better fish than this guy, but it's always fun to be reminded of who it is that your audience is, and never take it for granted, because I tell you, he's a great stick. You got a great mom, and there's a lot going on there. So nice small world there, dude.
And that's how it happens. You meet one angler, then all of a sudden you bump into somebody like our next guest, and then it just snowballs from there. You keep meeting people, right?
Well, we definitely don't want to piss this guy off, so let's not keep him behind stage too much longer, because I do want to get to know him. The one and only Harold Gravatt. How you doing, sir?
Good. Good evening.
How's it going, bud?
Harold, it was a pleasure to finally meet you. I have been following you on social media for some time. Digital creator, much like myself, a walleye fanatic, much like myself. But I'd like to know sort of where it all started for you, because let's face it, it didn't start at the NOWT. It certainly didn't start at the NOWT. You were a bass guy at one point.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, in the Kalamazoo area, we had the DNR Sports Center. It was the Tri-State Bass tournaments that would take place in inland lakes and Spring Lake, Coldwater, Pawpaw Lake, Gun Lake, and I actually started probably when I was 20 years old. Out of high school, going to college and fishing with my stepdad, doing these bass tournaments. And then it was me and the wife met in 2004, and I came up here to Sault Ste. Marie, and it was kind of funny because coming from the bass world, we're casting, we're not trolling. You're casting, right? You're casting, plastics and jig heads, and it was kind of different for me, but we hit the water up here, and we jumped out there, and I grabbed a rod and I started casting. And my brother-in-law kind of laughed. It's a little bit intimidating because I've never fished walleye before. And he said to my nephew, "Come on, Kyle, let's get these planer boards in before Uncle Harold works too hard." And that's how he started, right?
Now, the cool thing is about that, there's a caveat to that story, because what started as a casting presentation in the beginning, perhaps maybe you just didn't know any better, it's now evolved into that is your style. That's what you're known for.
Oh yeah, so many professional anglers are we're seeing it, right? I mean, they're saying it right on stage. I'm throwing the trolling rods out of the boat and I'm casting. Especially with the technology of forward-facing sonar today, it's happening all over. You're getting rid of the trolling rods. I mean, it's hard to you never leave fish to find fish, right? But that's what happens in trolling. I mean, you go over a pot of fish and you leave them. Why not target them? And it's all about targeting now and casting, throwing the trolling rods out. And John Goebel of Customized Charters, he said to me one day, he said, "Man, I'm just so frustrated." He says, "I had a charter and we started out, it was an older couple and they didn't know how to really cast." And he goes, "We were trolling for 4 hours." And he said, "We caught a smallmouth and nothing, no walleye. And the lady had to go to the restroom. We went to the restroom and I grabbed the trolling rods or threw them in the side of the cabinet. And I said, we're jigging." And he caught 4 or 5 walleye, just bam, 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 bam. He goes, "That's it. I'm done. I'm putting the trolling rods out on eBay. I'm getting rid of them."
Wow.
That's a funny story.
Funny to hear that, because geographically we're only about 80 miles apart on the same body of water. I'm on the north shore of Lake Huron, and for us trolling, I never pulled boards about 5 years ago. It was always jigs and bottom bouncing tight to structure. So it's kind of nice for us that the move this way was pretty natural for us.
Oh yeah.
Well, it is, because coming up from the south, ripping hair is something that, as a walleye angler, we got you had to learn at a fairly young age, because that was the most productive way of targeting fish or walleye, I should say, in the spring. Then you come up to the northern latitudes, and it is nowhere near as popular as it is down here in the south. So to your point, Dan, you're 100% right. It presentations vary depending on where you are in the country, but nonetheless, the common denominator is the love of walleye. And has it been a love of multi-species fishing for you, Harold, or is it strictly evolved now into just walleye?
The primary is walleye. Number one, it's easier to clean for me. The perch and the pike and the muskie. It's but something that I've learned to do is expand the species that I'm targeting, to grow the business. Clients are not always looking to catch walleye, but walleye are the easiest for me to catch, because that's all I've studied since 2004. Bringing in resources that I've become affiliated with, and people in the professional walleye world. I've learned to take on a whole new different technique. But I'm starting to expand on, whitefish and perch and pink salmon and, the kings and the coho. And it's always evolving. So it's kind of nice that when you have an alternative, if the walleye are just not hitting, then you can just, revert to pike or, some other species that is biting. So it gives you some fluctuation.
100%. And to an ex-charter himself, Ed McKenzie, he mirrored that on the regular down on the Bay of Quinte when the walleye weren't biting. And so he can certainly second that. When did you eventually get into guiding? Was that almost immediate, or have you just recently got into that?
So this is kind of a funny story. The wife kind of encouraged me to become a charter captain. She said, so as I became more experienced in catching walleye, I had a lot of friends and family, take me out. I saw your pictures. Take me out. So then you're taking them out. But, at the end of the day, you're paying for all the gas, right? And you're paying for all the lures and the jigs and the rods. And there's a lot of expense associated with that. And when the wife sat down and did all the math, she said, you need to become a charter captain, go get your license and actually do this, on the side. This will kind of shock you, maybe not. My primary job is a computer network engineer, cybersecurity, business continuity, disaster recovery. Yeah. So that's what I do on a primary basis. A lot of times I'm answering the phone on the water and remote controlling computers and servers right from my phone. And, with the mobility today in IT, it's just amazing what you can do even from the water.
I have to ask, sort of an offshoot. Is this your background? Because I know you served in the armed forces, and was counterintelligence something that was your forte?
No, I kind of ran into it. I ran into IT kind of on an accident. I was back in the day. I was working at Pharmacy on Upjohn, a pharmaceutical company in Kalamazoo, and I came up against a friend of mine that was working IT, and he told me, hey, I was the contact person in that area of the offices at Pharmacy on Upjohn. And he said, you should do this you should get on the help desk. So then I went from regulatory affairs to being an IT person on the help desk at this pharmaceutical company. And then over time, I went and got my Microsoft certification and became a Microsoft certified systems engineer with all the IT exams to prove that I had demonstrated skills and credibility to be behind the computer systems and servers and the backbone. So
well, I tell you, if you can talk on the phone and walk people through IT disasters and situations, guiding is just another day at band camp for you. That's an easy goal. Holy smokes!
Right. Yep. Yep. So yeah, a lot of times I'll be talking to customers and like I'm like, yeah, right now a buddy of mine, he kind of made fun of me, right? He said the customer said so and so. I said, well, I can't make it there today. I'm down in Detour laying fiber, and he just started laughing, just cracking up. He said, "Yep, Harold's laying fiber."
That's hilarious.
You know what? If all else fails, Harold gets paid, $135 an hour to tell users to reboot.
Well, I'll tell you, you're getting paid a lot more than you are tonight for appearing here on live, and I want to thank you for taking the time for joining Danny and I. Danny, as part of the NOWT, of course, not every event has a U.S. contingent of anglers, but it was inspiring and refreshing to see the number of American anglers participating in the Sioux event. What does that look like from a Canadian perspective? Because I'll tell you, it seemed like the American anglers fit in like they were just one and the same.
Well, I mean, it's no different when it comes from an anglers. It's our bench, it's our measuring stick, right? So we're always kind of competing because we don't generally compete against each other. So we watch the NWT, we watch the Masters, you watch all these different events and out there. See, you're always kind of are we as good or better, or are they better, kind of thing. So when you get to compete against each other and you realize that you're all really on the same level and you're doing all the same techniques and working the same way, it's kind of a nice feeling. It kind of makes you feel more invigorated to go across the pond to fish more events down there, and vice versa. Hopefully getting guys up here to fish more events. And so it's nice from that aspect. And like I said, like the conversation we're having tonight with Harold, just this understanding there's a whole different techniques, a whole different mindset of how they approach things as well, right?
100%. And from an American perspective, coming up here, Harold, and participating in Canadian events, is there much difference other than the cost?
Not really. I kind of liked, the whole, there was a different class of people up there with the whole, NXS jerseys and what have you. And the whole camaraderie was pretty solid. But it was actually nice to hear all these names. And, I've actually talked to Danny Bacon before on the water, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's the guy I talked to. Cause you never know who you're really talking to. Right. It's like, oh yeah, I'm Danny Bacon, from Spanish Ontario, and I got a YouTube channel. And you know what? The fishing world is such a small world when it comes to anglers. I'm telling you, it's amazing on who you see on the water, and it's good camaraderie, right? Like downstate, it seems like, on the water, it's a different class of people. Up here above the bridge, it's everybody gets along. Nobody's cutting each other off and, yelling at each other. But you go down there, man, and you get anxiety. You get like an upset stomach because you're just like, man, it's a different class of people. So, participating in that NOWT, it was refreshing, to meet you, Scotty, in person and see Danny and, John Goebel was there, and Dane Stanaway and Billy Atkinson. It was good camaraderie.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know who was more shocked to meet who. When you came to the dock, I right away turned to Lua and I said, is that Harold? Is that Harold Gravatt? She's like, yeah, how do you know him? I'm like, oh my God, how do you not know Harold? But yeah, I was taken back when you came back after a day out on the water and say, Scotty, how you doing? I'm like, Harold, dear Lord, you just made my day, man. The fact that you know my name, I tell you, I was taken back by that.
That's awesome.
Incredible.
No, it was a good time for sure.
And that's the thing. I will say, Danny, you can speak to this, but the camaraderie when it comes to, the Northern Ontario Walleye Trail and the anglers that participate, that camaraderie, in my opinion, is like second to none.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what keeps us all going. It's kind of like a little family reunion. You look forward to going to certain events because that's the only time you see these people. And you might have been 2 years before you've seen them in person. You get there, and not only are they looking forward to talking to you, they go, don't worry about it. We got a room on the couch for you. You can stay here. It's almost like you've only been apart a week, and how they treat you and everything like that. And I really enjoy that. And that's kind of the fun part of it all. And, of course, we're fishermen, so we got gossip just like everybody else, and nice to catch up with all that and trying to get everybody's spots and techniques out of each other, and then go from there. And then you find that after the tournament's done, that's when everybody kind of comes clean, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it, and I some of these people we keep talking after the fact, right?
100%. And Harold, I really enjoyed watching you interview some of the anglers, and I can forget the event, but you do something very similar to what I do with the NOWT. In that you're discussing things with the anglers, you're getting to know them, you're gaining their trust. But I will say this: your anglers during the competition are a lot more forthcoming with information than the anglers I have to deal with. If I could put a loonie aside for every time I was told that all their walleye were caught on a 5 of diamonds, I'd probably have $300 in a jar somewhere. So I have to say, I was taken back by watching you interview a lot of the anglers, a lot of really good sticks in the NWT, but the forthcoming of information. I mean, that was something that was unique to me. Is it like that on the trails that you participate in?
It differs. After the tournament's over with, the conditions change, right?
Yeah.
I mean, wind direction. Let's talk walleye for a second about the conditions and what I've learned. It's water clarity, it's current, it's the overcast, sun, overcast, cloudy, the temperature of the water, the wind direction is important, right? Because warm water is heavier than cold water, and walleye like warm water. So you follow the wind. If it's blowing into that shore, that's the shore you want to fish because that's where the warm water is going to be. And so many times, that I've fished the NTC, the bite was on. All of a sudden, the bite shuts off, and then you're like, "What changed?" And you look at your plotter, you look at your chart, and the temperature of the water was 67 degrees. Now it's 64. You're like, "We got to move. We got to move because the fish have shifted." There's cold water here, and the warm water is shifted, and you go follow the warm water. And those patterns and those changing conditions are variables that you have to be able to adjust to.
100%.
So at the end of the day, you can share what you did based on conditions because it's never going to be the same tomorrow, right? We know this, right? Like you fish today and you catch, 15 walleye.
Yeah.
Tomorrow you show up to the same damn spot and they moved. They're gone. They're not there anymore. What changed? Wind, clarity of the water, something changed, the conditions. So it's not really a secret, they have like some of those anglers like David Colton when he won the NWT up here. And he was fishing down, you knew where he was fishing because you could see it on video, right? The cameraman was on board. You knew where he was fishing. He was the only boat there. Yeah. And he was fishing the iridescent reef runners and the cheap sunglasses. But those are conditions that, that place now you see occasionally an angler will show up on it and pound it, but they're not there. So it's all conditions. So it changes per day.
So speaking of conditions, how detailed, how finite does it become when you talk about temperature, clarity, and wind direction? So if the water is clear, are you downsizing your baits? Are you downsizing, the test line you're using? Are you more apt to put a longer fluorocarbon leader on? What are some of the things that you do when it comes to water clarity?
Well, in water clarity, when it's really clear, you can see them, the fish are there, but they will not bite in clear water. They can see the boat. It's amazing. Like when on forward facing sonar and dirtier water, you can get within 40 to 60 feet to those fish. But in that real clear water, you got to distance yourself from 100 feet. You're casting 100 feet to get out to those fish. I seen it happen down at Mullet Lake that I couldn't get within 80 feet of these fish. You get within 80 feet and the wind, right, the front of your boat is pounding the water and they can hear that boat. They know the boat's there. They can hear it. But when in some of those like really clear conditions, you got to go find the dirty water. You can find that clear water and there's nothing you can do to trigger them to get, a bite. Different presentations, like, when you cast and you just rip it really hard and they bite because they're angry. They don't bite because they're hungry. They just bite because it's a reaction bite, right? So you just got to rip it really hard instead of that finesse, snapping it straight up. And they like that bait to go up and down, right? While you're always looking up, they will 4 foot high for their bait and 1 foot low. And it's funny when we were fishing Erie down there, you'd actually see those fish. They were on an angle like this. You actually see their tail down. They were pointing up, and those fish were the easy target. But those conditions in clear water, it's hard to fish walleye.
Just to touch on that clear water thing, one of the things that I noticed in my part of the world is like if you get into, say you got a nice little pod of 5 or 6 walleye and they're 60, 70 feet out, you catch one, the other ones just immediately scatter and they almost disappear and they're super hard to find. And I don't know if you find the same thing happens in your neck of the woods and where we are, there's a lot of structure, we're not on flat. So sometimes they'll disappear and if you find them, they've gone down like almost 70 feet of water and you're not touching them. They're just want nothing to do with you after catching one.
Right.
Now, when it comes to water temperature, and of course, the infamous match the hatch and what have you, but is there a specific type of bait that you like to use in different temperatures of water?
Not really, not for me. I haven't found, that my jig heads and the plastics have been my primary go-to. And then when the plastics aren't hitting and you're changing, there's times I change like 20 different baits, the Berkeley finishers, right? The death jigs, the jig heads with the plastics. And a lot of times, what's his name? Corey Sprinkle. Yeah. He'll run around and he'll grab like a crankbait. He'll cast a crankbait until he finds a pot of fish. And then you'll throw on, something different, like a Berkeley snap jig, and a plastic worm. worms, the paddle tails, but the temperature of water, I've found that I don't think it's dependent on what bait you throw in different temperatures of water or warmer water, or it's just throwing everything at the fish until you find out what they really want.
100%.
Bright colors, flat colors, the blacks, the whites, the chartreuse, the pinks, whatever made walleye, we've talked about this numerous times, whatever made walleye go after pink. What resembles pink, right? Why do they like pink? What's pink?
Well, it's so true, Harold. Big Jim and I talk about it all the time. Worms are so effective when it comes to fishing. Doesn't matter if you're on a dock or you're out in 100 feet of water. Worms seem to produce fish. Now, how does a fish know to eat that? It's not like there's schools of worms. It's not like, worms are spawning in a back bay or anything like that, or falling out of trees left, right, and center. So yeah, it's those interesting anomalies that hopefully one day, maybe when we're upstairs and we're chatting to the big man, maybe he can let us know, because I don't know what it is about worms, leeches, that these fish all of a sudden get tuned in and are fixated on. But it's fascinating stuff. Speaking of live bait, is that something that is typically used on your side of the border when it comes to tournaments?
And so these fish get really finicky when they're not hitting the plastics, and a lot of times you can throw on a crawler on a quarter-ounce jig, like a tungsten jig, and cast at these fish. And my partner this year, James Plowman, he's from the Drummond area, and John Goble actually hooked me up with James Plowman. He's like, get with James Plowman. He's always out on the water, but he's always by himself. He doesn't talk to anybody. He seems like a reserved and, kind of a removed kind of angler. Well, I experienced it first class. I'm casting these jig heads with the plastics. He's got a 3/8 ounce jig with a crawler and 20-mile-an-hour wind. And he's throwing this jig, and he's just pulling it off the bottom. And he's just waiting. He's like, oh, he's got it. He's got it. I can feel it. It's in his mouth right now. I'm going to let him have it for a minute. And all of a sudden he sets a hook, and I'm going, are you kidding me? I casted at that fish like 20 times. But again, it's a learning curve, right? You learn from other people's techniques, strategies. It's amazing what just a 3/8 ounce jig head with a crawler on it can do. And you can see these fish. They're just, where did they go? They're still there. You just can't see them because they're pinned to bottom. And that fish, I could see once he set the hook, I could see the fish come off the bottom. I'm like, are you kidding me? I never saw that fish until you actually set the hook and it came off the bottom.
That is a downside with forward-facing sonar. When you say that bottom foot seems to disappear for us. So fish at the bottom, we don't know they're there, and a lot of guys will scan that real quick and take off. There's no fish here, but if it looks fishy, you still got to throw your line at it. You never know if they'll be tight to the bottom. Like you said, they can hear the sonars ticking, they can hear the motors coming, and they know you're there. And their first instinct is to get tight to the bottom, right?
100%.
Right. Yeah, you can leave them and come back 2 hours later, and they're off the bottom.
That's right.
Right. You could. Me and John Goble experienced it firsthand. These fish that we were hitting for the St. Mary's River tournament, we knew they were there. I had a charter. I think you probably saw the picture. We had, 13 walleye, and this was before the tournament. It was on Wednesday, and the tournament was on Sunday. And I'm like, I got 13. They're here. And then it got so much pressure that those fish pushed right down to the bottom. So we left those fish and came back 3 hours later. Nobody was there. 3 hours later, and there they are suspended. And you're catching them on the finishers. You're throwing the Berkeley finisher, and bam, 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 bam. And it's like, where were they this morning? They get so much pressure, they just stick right to the bottom.
Yeah, we seen that up in Cap's case, and same thing. There's no pressure on that system. And all of a sudden, the tournament rolls in with 80, 90 boats going in. Actually, it was Cameron Caron paid attention to that. He said he watched the boat go by, watched that walleye go to bottom. He says, I'm just going to watch them and see how long it takes for them to come back up. The boat was long gone. So at least 15 minutes, and that fish finally came back up. And they're not used to boat traffic like we got down here.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. I will say this, and I haven't spent a lot of time targeting bass in my life. I've spent most of my life targeting walleye, and the one thing I will constantly remind myself is just when you think you have them figured out, they throw a wrench into things. And I will say everything that you just said, Harold, I will say the same, and ditto too. Danny, I will pose this to you because there are so many new inventions when it comes to baits presentations. There's so many different presentations that are versatile when it comes to different species. But is there anything this year that caught your attention when it came to a certain presentation, or maybe a unique way to present an old-fashioned bait?
Oh, yeah, the death jigs were phenomenal. We've known about it for a little bit, but I find this year's, give somebody enough time, somebody's going to figure out how to really maximize the production on it. And I really started to see that this year, and that's probably like the old bait that's kind of around. It's just a hook gets a slow death and a worm, but somebody they managed to spit that on a jig, get it properly, get it working. As for a new bait, though, I was super impressed with the finishers. I love them. I think everybody's on that bandwagon, and they are deadly in the right situations. They're just a phenomenal bait.
100%. Harold, you come from an area where the jigging Rap has sort of taken all walleye anglers by storm. Something that we always sort of thought was especially for winter fishing, hard water fishing, but using it during tournaments, pre-fishing, I see it a lot, and I'm always taken back when I see anglers use that presentation in the summer in the soft water. Are there any other baits that you have really seen taking the industry by storm?
So I'm actually on the Wapsie lure. The Wapsie lures are amazing. I mean, I've casted. I was in the NTC in Saginaw Bay, and casting with my partner Gerald Sawyer, and it was crazy. He had the shiver minnow, and I had the Wapsie lure, and I was catching fish like every 8 to his 1 with the Wapsie lure. The Wapsie lure, everybody says, "Oh yeah, it's just it's a spinoff from the shiver minnow." Not exactly. Those Wapsie lures are very lower profile, and Jerry Ruffalo, he's a great charter captain in Green Bay, and he uses those Wapsie lures religiously, and then Brandon, his son, started using the Wapsie lure, and so I went there to fish the Fox River Spring Classic, that's down there in Green Bay, and that's in May. It's like May 12th. It's like the weekend before opening day up here. But I've really become acclimated to the Wapsie lure and actually had great success with the Wapsie lure. I mean, the Jigging Rap, the Wapsie lure, the shiver minnow, just phenomenal. But with the Wapsie lure, I've actually, the purple Cisco minnow is my favorite. All over the St. Mary's River system. But there's also some other colors in the for the Wapsie lure. It's Wapsie lure, WAPSIE lure.com. And checking those out. I mean, I've had promoted the product because I'm actually on the guy's pro staff, and he's sent me multiple baits. Like when we need them, when the NWT was up here, Brandon Ruffalo and Jesse Brady and Dan Harper, they were all fishing together, and they were doing great on the Wapsie lure. And so we got Wapsie lures shipped, and they had arrived the morning of the tournament. And I actually grabbed the box real quick and took it out there for those guys before they took off. But that's when it was really foggy, right? And when it was really foggy, like there was, I mean, the whole entire field seemed like they were down at Drummond Island, because there were a lot of guys that were running to Alpena. Well, you couldn't make that run because they didn't take off till 9:30, I think. So that was a moot point. I mean, they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But
do you feel like, because you're from the bass world, the old spy baits, you think they might be making a comeback thanks to the finisher, because they're pretty similar, and guys have learned new techniques using those finishers. They might adapt that to the spy baits.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of times, when some of these like West Michigan bass, when they come up here and they're throwing some of these baits, I mean, anglers are always collaborating, right? And they're like, "Yeah, how'd you do?" And, "Oh yeah, I can't believe it. I was fishing for bass and I got walleye." You're fishing for walleye and you get bass, and you're like, "Really?" They're like, "Yeah, I was stupid. This is what I was using." But yeah, I mean, it happens. I mean, they intermingle, right? I mean, any of those fishers, I mean, you're watching some of those bass, those pro bass anglers using the finisher to fish bass. And now we're throwing them at walleye, and the walleye are just eating them up.
Ned rigs.
I got to ask both of you. Danny, I'll start with you. What is your confidence bait during the dreaded mayfly hatch? I know it's one of the toughest times for walleye anglers to be productive. However, where Harold is in Port Clinton, it doesn't seem to matter, but we'll get to Harold in a sec. But Danny, what's your go-to bait? What's your confidence bait during the mayfly hatch?
Well, I got two really. I'm always going to pitch a jig in the middle of that time. I'll probably try and match the hatch, like small jigs in certain areas and that. And if that's not panning out, then I'm pulling slow depth all day long. And it's one of those features they're bottom bouncing, and especially little mud flats, which where it's just going to produce a bite. So it's definitely a confidence bait for sure.
That's awesome. For you, Harold, what do you usually throw? What's your most productive and what you would consider a confidence bait during the mayfly hatch?
Well, it's kind of funny because that used to be my experience all the time with the mayfly hatch, right? You're out there pulling crawler harnesses, the orange and white, to try and match the hatch. The mayflies is actually the jiggers, right? They come and they develop and they become a mayfly. But everybody was trying to match a hatch and just like we're suffering during the mayfly hatch. My go-to is Kit's tackle, and this is funny because everybody makes fun of me. Oh yeah, Harold, purple rain, right? Oh yeah, purple rain, the hair jig, right? I mean, if you think about it, those jiggers, they have hair on them, and those hair jigs are just phenomenal. At Kit's tackle, I always order the purple rain, and then I'll tip it. Sometimes I'll tip it with a smelt looking Berkeley plastic. The ones that have the flavored, the salt impregnated, and you go out there with a hair jig, and I was going out there, and there was other people around me, and I'm pulling fish left and right, and everybody around me is like so frustrated, like what the? You can hear it in the water, right? They're like, well, what was he using? I don't know, I think it was a hair jig. You can hear that conversation on the water; it just echoes, and then you're just kind of laughing, but. Kit's tackle, Kits tackle. Has those hair jigs, and also using the stinger hooks, right? But stinger hooks on your hair jigs has been the go-to for me during the mayfly hatch, and I've gone out there for 45 minutes and come in with 10 walleye. A
single stinger, or do you use the treble?
The treble. Yep, the treble on the stinger. Yep. Because those, in current, and especially in current during the mayfly hatch, because that's what they're doing, right? They're staying in that current and they're hitting, those mayflies, that are developing as they're coming down the current. And another thing too is, getting in those buoys, right, in current, and getting on that back eddy, and those walleye are like right on the edges. You'll see a lot of boats that'll be snug right up to David Kolb did it, and the Masters Walleye Circuit. He was right up on top of that buoy, fishing those walleye in that current right on the edges, because walleye are lazy, right? They don't like to go after their bait. They like to hang out in the current and just hit bait as it's going by. But finding those currents, those back eddies, and dirty water, and throwing the hair jig.
I have often, and Ed McKenzie can attest to this, I've often used the comparison between humans and walleye on the regular, because we are no different than they are. Sometimes they will show us how lazy they can be. They can show us how hungry they want to be as well, and how unpredictable they are at times. They certainly keep us on our toes. Mm-hmm. Danny, obviously with the trail has come to an end. There's not a lot of events coming up sort of on our side. Is there anything that is happening for you? Like, is there a tournament trail, or is there a rod and gun club that's going to have a tournament soon that you're going to be participating in?
I'm actually Anglers Atlas, the Midwest Challenge. I'm in on that, and I'm currently still finishing up our Facebook event. I'm in with a group there. It's called the VIP Fishing, so that's coming to an end in November. So we're gonna ride that up. But this is more just glory fishing, having fun, and just catch what we can, and prepping for next season. And as any guys know, especially fishing in tournaments, not only trying to start one, it's there's a lot on the plate to get all that going, right?
100%. And so, Harold, the question then comes to you. And Dan, thanks so much for the plug for the Midwest Walleye Challenge. As Mike and I are hosts of that event, we're proud to be and honored to be a part of that event. But I have to say, you've mentioned 3 tournament trails that I can think of, Harold, just in this interview alone. How many different trails are there for American anglers to participate in down there?
Oh gosh, the ones that come to my mind are the Masters Walleye Circuit, AIM, the NWT, the Michigan Walleye Tour. Those are the primary ones that I'm familiar with. That most of these anglers go and fish these on a regular basis. The Masters Walleye Circuit, AIM, NWT, and the Michigan Walleye Tour.
And I will say, are any events still upcoming? Have you got a fall classic that's coming up, or any other events that you're participating in before the?
No, that's all come to the championships have already taken place, and it's kind of funny because when I think this is ideal for me because you've got all these bow hunters that are out in the woods, and right now on the water is where it's happening at. You're catching 26 to 30-inch walleye because they're gorging themselves. When that temperature of the water drops to 58 to 56 to 58, these walleye are chasing smelt, and you're looking at tons of bait, the smelt that are coming up. And what's really funny, and I can't figure this out, Danny, maybe you've experienced this down in Spanish, but these fish I'm catching are all males. We caught 8 this morning and 1 pike, but out of those 8, they were gorging themselves. Yeah. Every one of them were a male. What's that?
We're mostly females on our end of the world. We're seeing a lot of the males, but they're gearing up. We when the Cisco or when that water temp gets around 45 degrees, the Cisco comes spawn on the mud flats, and that's when your personal best season. November's my favorite time of month. That's when you get the big ones, but we've got October from now on, like big walleye. But it's smelt balls are chasing all over the place, but they're waiting for the Cisco to come spawn. But majority we're catching is females, but big males too. Like the other day I was catching males and they were all 23, 24 inches, but meanwhile I had 18-inch females mixed in there. So there's a good mixture around.
That's awesome. And usually, the males are the last ones to leave. Females are the first to get in there, especially during spawn. But those males always seem to show up the darndest times. Now you have taken your love of fishing one step further, and you have started your own charter company. How long have you been at that now?
I bought my boat in 2021, so I've been doing it for 3 plus years.
And have you always done it out of Port Clinton, Harold?
No, primarily right here in the Sioux. John runs down there to Port Clinton in the spring and charters, but that body of water is something that I want to do more of. I fished Detroit River for the first time this year, and that was amazing. Just vertical jigging, and boat control is the secret to fishing walleye down there in that current. You got to run up and you got to do 1.2 to keep that jig vertical, right? And that's all about boat control. Left, right, and you're maneuvering around 50 boats, right? And you just got to be doing the right speed. But then you'll notice, somebody that's getting in the way of everybody else, and they don't have good boat control. They don't have the right speed of following that current, doing 1.2, 1.3 to keep that jig vertical. But it's a new experience down there, and I want to do that next spring. Do some more charters there with John Goebel down there at Customized Charters.
Well, a good friend and follower of CFN, Kevin Swartz, is out of the Port Clinton area, so it was really interesting to see that you are now making your charter company available down there in that area. And I will have to say, Kevin showed me firsthand how incredible that fishery is down in that area. You go out and you plan a half-day charter, and in a lot of cases, you blink and you have your quota like that. And there were some charters that Kevin would tell us that the expectation was to at least fish till 10 o'clock. And he would have to tell his clients, we got to go back. You filled your quota we can't fish anymore. So it's good in one way, sort of bad in another. But if you are going out there to shop in a shopping market of walleye, Port Clinton is definitely a place that you want to visit if you love your walleye.
Oh, absolutely. There's, I think, what did John Hoyer say? There was 22 million walleye down there in Lake Erie. 22 million. And it's amazing to run 35 miles an hour. And, John said, when fishing that body of water down there, don't go find an area and think that those fish are going to be there. Go find the fish and then mark them until you stop marking them, and then turn around and follow that line. But again, I was fishing with another buddy of mine in the NTC, and John, his trolling motor messed up on day one. His trolling motor was coming out of the water, the spring, the latch on his Tarova, and now he's running the Ghost. But on day one, he had like 22 pounds because his trolling motor kept jumping out of the water and spooking the fish. But day two, he comes back and he's jigging, and he comes in and weighs in at 35 pounds.
Oh, jeez, incredible.
I know
that's pretty frustrating when you're letting your equipment doesn't function. It can really mess up your day. So
yeah,
he was done with the Tarova and went to the Ghost.
Nice.
I know you say with that system. I got to fish. Me and John Goebel, we actually fished the Master Walleye out of Monroe last year, and we were running all the way to Sandusky. So it's a weird fishery. I've never been graphing fish at 40 miles an hour and like, oh, we don't want to touch this pile. We'll touch this pile and that. And like you said, they're very sensitive to a condition change there. On day two, John and I kind of figured out how they were reacting to. We had to stall the boards on one side, and when the sun came out, they would always go off. My problem is John figured out before I did, it was controlling the boat, so he'd always turn right and made sure he got the fish. But it's an amazing fishery. I'm looking forward to go back down there. And Detroit River we're hoping to go this year in April. We're actually going to do the Masters down there, Michigan Walleye as well. So
sweet. Harold, I got to ask, there's a lot of tough questions, a lot of tough decisions that are going to be upcoming for a number of tournament trails. First and foremost, when it comes to some of your circuits, some of your trails, have you seen a tick downward when it comes to the number of participants?
Absolutely. And I, without going into details, we all know, some of these circumstances associated with the fishery up here and, Canadian water and the limits, the slot limit, how many fish you're allowed in. And it's by district, right? When Jeff Kelm called me on a Tuesday and asked me, like, what is the limit? And I'm like, in Canadian water in Ontario. And I'm like, what district? Because it's different by district. It's not, Canadian water is this is the rules. And it's by district. He's like, are you kidding me? I'm like, no, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, if I were you, I would prohibit Canadian water.
it's not. Yeah, sorry to cut you off.
No, but it created a lot of animosity. And things like what transpired at Lake Erie Walleye Trail, it totally tarnished the industry. You got all these anglers, all these sports fanatics. Oh yeah, did sinkers? And I'm like, gosh, lead weights, and I'm like, okay, well, how do you respond to that? It's just like it's tiring. It's worn out.
100%.
Because of our zone changes, like I live in Lake Huron, it's zone 14, which is also Sault Ste. Marie, but there's a boundary in Bruce Mine. So on one side, you're allowed 5 walleye any size. On my side, it's 2 walleye per angler, and you have a slot of 16 to 22. Same zone, but there's that change. And that's actually that area that kind of caused that problem with the NWT, that the NWT now, its Canadian waters are off limits now as a result of that.
Interesting.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's a tick down. I think that, people are getting, some of these anglers are getting frustrated with, the conditions that change and the circumstances, and it's okay. It's not okay. They're getting exhausted with it. So I think it's definitely a tick down. That created a lot of turbulence in the industry. and the NWT and AIM and some of those other tournaments, and the Michigan Walleye Tour too. You know, that was up here. The championship was up here in Sault Ste. Marie last year, I think it was. And there was a lot of discrepancy associated with, fishing Canadian water and what the limits were and taking crawlers into, Canadian water.
100%.
And you don't see those issues in Detroit, though. On the Detroit River, that doesn't seem to be the issue. They can fish both sides, it seems like. So I don't know why St. Mary's and Detroit has such a big discrepancy on the Ontario side anyways.
It's a great point, Danny. I never even thought of that. That's a great point. I do have to ask, too, because we don't really have a lot of options up here when it comes to tournament trails and professional walleye trails to participate in. Are there too many tournaments, perhaps, Harold, down your way? Like I know you just mentioned 4 or 5 different trails. Is it too watered down? Is there only so much money to go around, and maybe we should think of tightening up the reins, or what do you think?
I mean, back in the day, we had the NWT, and then we had the Masters Walleye Circuit up here in the Sioux. But I don't think there's too many tournaments. To be honest with you, there's a lot of fish in the system. I mean, you just got to go find them. There's a lot of water, right? I mean, we're talking about all the way up into Superior, all the way down to Detour, to Alpena, to the Mackinac Bridge, to Port, St. Martin's. Mm-hmm. Down there, there's a lot of fish in the system. You just got to go find them. And I don't think that the tournaments have put any pressure on these fish, or there's, I don't think it's watered down. You just got to go find the fish. Now, down in Drummond, there's a lot of traffic, right, during that NWT, because Drummond's a great body of water. But that's where you got to, switch to your variables and adjust to changing conditions. Change your presentation, change your baits,
So, of course, the NOWT has talked at great length about forward-facing sonar. And I myself don't necessarily understand why it is such a hot topic, or why it's become such a hot topic. Sure, I've used it. Sure, I see the benefits of it. But, spot lock and trolling motors, I think, had a far more impact on the industry and on tournament fishing than anything else. Now, forward-facing sonar is, as it evolves, it will become more detailed. It will likely become more user-friendly. Are you excited about that, or are you seeing a need to maybe take a stance on electronics?
You're asking me. Yeah. I don't think that forward-facing sonar, it has its benefits, but let's just think about side scan. Side scan, I've seen so many anglers, and they can the side scan. They can still use the side scan, and they see those fish, right? If you know how to use your electronics, you can have forward-facing sonar, but if you don't know how to use it, it's useless. So you better and people become intimidated, right? Some of these older veterans in the walleye world are using forward-facing sonar, but they want me to come and set up their Garmin, with color gain and color limit and stabilization and compass calibration. I mean, you get that rockiness, right? And you're looking at forward-facing sonar, and you get this, calibrate my compass. I had it this morning, for some unknown reason, it started to do this, and I'm like, got to calibrate, boom, 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 calibrate and do a 180, right? And boom, all of a sudden it's flat and it's good. I don't think forward-facing sonar, if you know how to use your electronics, regardless if it's forward-facing sonar or a side scan, you can catch fish. It's been proven time and time again. You've got those guys that are casting and catching fish with side scan. If you know how to read side scan, you can tell if those fish are, on the side. You can tell if they're suspended, right? I always say, if you take a rock and you set it on the bottom of the water, of the lake, and you shine a flashlight on it, the shadow is going to appear right on the other side of the rock. That rock's right on bottom. If you lift that rock and you shine the flashlight, the shadow is going to be 5 feet to the side of it. You know that's a suspended fish and it's active. So forward-facing sonar, side scan, a lot of people were just tearing it up with side scan as well. So, casting at those fish, knowing that they're there.
Yeah, sounds very familiar, Dan?
Absolutely, yeah. You pretty much regurgitated a lot of the words that I keep saying. I'm a huge fan of it, but Side imaging, actually, it has one other added feature. I know Lowrance does that. I know Garmin does that. It's like you can actually mark your waypoint right on your side scan and just zip right back around. Whereas forward-facing sonar, you don't have that ability. You kind of got to narrow yourself down. But yeah, I love technology. I think it's great. I don't think it's hurting it in any way. I think it's really, it is changing the tournament trail as opposed to the regular guys 10 years ago to the regular guys now. But that happens anyways. I mean, everybody kind of evolves. That's what drives us. Guys that are constantly winning are the guys that I'm trying to beat, and I'm hopefully someday I become that person where people are trying to beat me and kind of catch me. So that's just the driving force. It's not the technology that's beating me. It's the guys that understand what they're doing is what's beating me.
Well said. All right. So we've talked about fishing pressure. We've talked about the number of tournaments. We now just finished talking about electronics. So the only other variable that's having an effect on tournaments and the decrease in participants has to be cost. Is there any way we can circumvent that? Because if we've just touched on all the variables, because let's be honest, I don't know any other variables that are having any effect on the level of participation in these tournaments other than the cost. Is there any way you can think of that we can somehow change that? Or do you guys have any ideas? Harold, I'll let you go first. Where you see tournaments in the next 5 years if the current trend continues?
Well, I think with all these different electronics and companies coming into the market for walleye fishing, I think there's a lot of opportunities for being sponsored by some of these companies to promote their product. I don't consider myself a phenomenal angler, like Danny said. I don't really compete in my opinion. I don't really compete against other people. I'm competing with myself, right? I'm like, did I change? What would I have changed what would I have done anything different? And but I want to be that angler that learns. I'm always learning. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity. There's going to be a lot of opportunity to promote products and be sponsored by some of these companies to, number one, fish their baits and get, some of the gas reimbursement. And, but you're right. I mean, there is a lot of cost. I was just talking to my buddy, Brandon Ruffalo, that said, I've easily spent over $25,000 in fishing the NWT this year. I mean, you're making trips to South Dakota, you're making trips to Illinois, and he's in Green Bay, Wisconsin, Two Rivers, Wisconsin. And he was just talking about all the expense associated with gas prices, right? I mean, gas prices have been like through the roof. Not only that, but the wear and tear on your trailer, your tires. There's so much expense that goes into it that not the everyday Joe knows and understands. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity to promote other people's products and get sponsorships to help finance those costs. But
great points, Dan. I'll have to ask you just to jump in as well, because the only tournament trails that I know of that are increasing exponentially when it comes to the level of participation are kayak tournaments.
Yeah,
they've really taken the industry by storm. But do you have any suggestions? Do you want to share anything that maybe you've thought of that maybe these tournaments do have to do a hard stop, rethink, pivot, whatever you want to call it, in order to engage those anglers?
Well, from like our standpoint with the NLWT, for example, I mean, we have 7 tournaments to choose from, so that dictates a lot with anglers, because I'm involved with the board, but that's how I dictate. I can only spend so much money. Like to Harold's point, I easily put maybe around $11,000 just in tournaments last year. So that's very costly when it comes out of your pocket and all the traveling and the time off and all that kind of stuff. So you limit the amount you do. That being said, though, I think we could tap into the Americans. They come up here, it's half the price for them. So it's much easier for them to come fish our tournaments. But
sounds like we're cooler to hang around with too, by the way. Dan.
Exactly. Yeah. I try to throw a picture here, but he's not biting on that one, eh?
No disrespect. I don't mean anything by it, but it's so true, because every tournament trail is facing the same issue. At the end of the day, how do we get participation up? How do we get companies involved? How do we increase the cash prizes? What do we do to incentivize the anglers to participate? And it is a struggle, and every tournament trail is facing that problem, except for our kayak anglers. So,
And just to kind of add to that, it's not necessarily just the tournament trails that are suffering. Like you just came from Cap Mactash, I'm sure they have their stories. All these resorts, all these camps, they're seeing the same problem, right? Because there's a cost associated there, and it really boils down to like how much it's going to cost you to get there. Like it's Harold can probably attest. It's not uncommon to go to a tournament and have a $1,500 or $1,600 gas bill. That's just your fuel bill, just around. So you haven't even got the hotels or food and stuff like that. And then, I know. We use the excuse, well, we're gonna buy it anyways, but we tend to buy a bit more of it, or a little bit different. But bait alone, because we don't take a chance. We got plastics, we got crankbaits, we got everything, but we're putting worms or putting minnows in the boats too. So it's not uncommon to have a $450 bait bill on top of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it turns out they're not biting on minnows, so it's a lot of money you're just dragging around.
100%. And it was enlightening, sort of offshoot from what we're talking about now. But in terms of cost, I had to get Lloyd to repeat it. But he was telling me that with his plane ticket from Saskatchewan, and a few incidental costs of getting up to Camp McIntosh, it was still cheaper for him to fish here in Ontario than it would be for him to fish in his own province and book a lodge up in the northern.
Miss Scotty still there?
I think we lost him. I wasn't sure if he was gone because you're pretty still there. So I guess there's something.
Yeah. I was just waiting for a response, but
I'm starting to think. I was like, maybe I'm the one that's lost here, but
yeah.
So how you've spent a few years too with the St. Mary's Walleye Club, correct? Are you still involved with that, or?
Oh yeah, yep. I've learned. I was the NTC director for a couple of years, and talking with Katie and Jeff Kelm and understanding all the benefits associated with the Walleye Federation and what they offer. Some of these clubs, a lot of these clubs that come from the Walleye Federation, there's a lot of liability. But when you join the Walleye Federation, you protect yourself with some of the benefits associated with insurance coverage and liability coverage. It's amazing. But I think, the St. Mary's Walleye Trail, the founder, Andre Saruk, had founded the St. Mary's Walleye Club based on family fun friendly, right? And then when the NTC came to the Sioux, everybody was pushing the St. Mary's Walleye Club to become a member of the Walleye Federation so they could fish the NTC where it was going to take place up here. Remember that? It was Ron Gordon, Sean Bowerman, Dane Stanaway, Josh Gordon, Justin Champagne, that were competing in that. But when they became a member of the Walleye Federation, once you start, I don't think there's a lot of people that don't understand, like the St. Mary's Walleye Club and some of these clubs, that's how you get an NTC bid, right? And so once you get an NTC bid, it's only the St. Mary's Walleye Club, it's only a $600 check, depending on how many boats are participating. That's not a big, very, very big return. On the contrary, you're right. When you get an NTC bid, you're going to compete for $150,000. That's right. It's more than just a $600 check, right? If you become one of the top 4 anglers and Angler of the Year, then you're going to the NTC where you can win $150,000 plus, right?
Yeah.
So once you start throwing money in there, like the NTC and some of these bids, and you're going to compete for $150,000, it's not really. It's more than just family fun friendly.
It's a qualifier is what it really is.
Exactly. That's what it is. Yeah. And some of those NTC side pots that take place, if you get Angler of the Year, John Hoyer fished with somebody from West Michigan Walleye Club. That's how John Hoyer fished the NTC this year, and I think that's what I'm told. And that came from Jeff Kelm. I was like, how did John Hoyer get an NTC bid? Because he won that NWT, and then he turned around and fished the NTC like 2 weeks later, right? Yeah. But he got the bid to fish with somebody that had a bid for Angler of the Year from West Michigan Walleye Club, and then they reached out to John Hoyer, and John Hoyer joined them to fish the NTC. So that's the benefit of getting an NTC bid as Angler of the Year. But when you win an NTC bid through the side pot, you have to fish the NTC with that partner that you fished in that NTC side pot with. The only exception is that if in the event they cannot fish, you have to fish that event with somebody else in the same side pot tournament.
Okay.
So there's some of those restrictions. So that bid that you're fishing for Angler of the Year is awarded by the Walleye Club, right? And the bid that you're winning through the side pot is awarded by the Walleye Federation. So that's the difference. If you get a bid for Angler of the Year, you can go fish with anybody. You can call up the, Craig Sleemans and, John Hoyers and Keith Gravatt and go fish it with them because you've got the bid.
Nice.
Interesting stuff. Wow. Well, Dan, thanks for saving me there. I don't know what happened to the internet, but it all of a sudden just crapped out. We have hit our hour time limit, if you will. We don't really have a limit, but Harold, I'd love to keep you longer, but I know you've got other things to do. Danny, likewise. But I will wrap this up by saying, Harold, it was an honor to meet you finally. I wish you nothing but good luck in the coming years.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I tell you, I hope one day spend a little bit of time on the water with you because you're good people, and we need more of that in our industry. I tell you.
Likewise, we'll have to get together and get out there on the water.
Absolutely.
Right on. All right, Harold, you have yourself a great night. Thanks again for joining us.
Yep, you as well. Take care, Scotty. Take care, Danny.
Bye, buddy.
Wow, honor to meet that gentleman. It's an honor to talk to him, and of course, he came forth with a lot of information. And this is the part I love. Obviously, Danny, as you know, during tournament time, it's totally different. Guys are on their game, they're on their focus, they're not willing to play their cards, they hold them very close to their chest. But when it's over and you get that little bit of an exhaust, then we become a little bit more willing to share some information. And there was a lot that was shared here tonight.
Absolutely. Like you feel like we just cracked open like a little safe all of a sudden, got a
Right?
peek inside there. I was
Exactly.
I love it. It's really enjoyable. Like, I've gotten to talk to Harold over the years a little bit, but mostly on Messenger, so you don't get that kind of a conversation. So we're definitely going to have to take him up on his offer and get him on here again.
100%. We will be, if you guys are interested, of Fish and Game clubs, tournament trails, anybody that's interested in promoting an upcoming event or an event that's happened already this year, Dan and I would love to talk to them, whether it's an angler, a sponsor, or a tournament director. We want to give you guys the forte, the platform through which you can promote your event, promote your community,
your sponsors,
and all the wonderful sponsors. Yeah. 100%. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. Dan, as always, dude, it's a pleasure spending some time with you, and I look forward to it every week. We'll try and do this every week, but it'll all depend on content and availability. But nonetheless, Dan, thanks for spending some time tonight.
My pleasure. As long as we don't start repeating ourselves, we're doing good.
Absolutely. So let's end it while we can. Folks,
right.
Next time, thanks for all who joined us. Thanks for all your great comments and questions. And we look forward to spending some more time with you on the Power Hour in the future. Until then, have yourselves a great week.